Hi, my name is Dominic Quagliozzi. I'm a visual artist.
Hi, I'm Dylan Mortimer. I am an artist that was born with cystic fibrosis, and I make artwork about the lived experience. I would love to have you come look at my journey at DNJ Gallery, along with 17 other artists from around the world who create artwork of their lived experience with cystic fibrosis and create work contending with that. We would love to see you anytime up to June 22nd. Our closing is on June 22nd from 12 to 4. Would love to see you at this exhibition. And if you'd like to learn more, please listen to this conversation.
My first question is, when did you fall in love with art and why did you have to be part of the art world?
Yeah, I started drawing, started engaging with art in an extracurricular way. I mean, outside of classes and stuff. Probably when I was like 8 years old. Did not consider that I had any talent or gifting for it, just liked doing it. And I remember thinking like other kids in class were better than me, but I liked doing it and kept doing it until, not long after I was sort of looked at in that way, like I was a really talented person, and then I didn't have many classes, early on. I mean, some grade school, some middle school, but really not till high school. The intensity and quality of the classes started to rise, and with it, my hunger and thirst for doing more of it, and so and the path just kind of went from there. I didn't know at that time really that there were art schools, like I didn't, but I would start in high school seeing posters for them, seeing pamphlets for them, and that became my path. And so, yeah, that's just sort of how it developed early on. And then, I did go to art school, did go to grad school for art. But yeah, I mean, I'll never forget touring, art schools and just the idea that like you could just go here and do art for your college was like, that felt amazing. I mean, just seeing studios with, easels in them and just seeing, people just working. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this, what freedom, what creativity, what, like, and you get to do this like for college. So anyway, yeah, that was, that was sort of how I entered in.
Yeah, so I started making art early on in my life when I was mostly, uh, you know, probably 5, 6 years old. Really loved drawing and, making marks and coloring and things like that. And that kind of blossomed over the years as I was in the hospital a lot, trying to find things to do. I missed a lot of school when I was younger because of cystic fibrosis and being hospitalized. And drawing and painting and coloring kind of became part of my lifestyle in the hospital, which translated again when I was out of the hospital. I did a lot of art for school, and I was always like the go-to kid at school for the posters and the flyers for events at school and things like that.
To add on to that, when did it go from an interest to obsession and that it was just part of the life of always creating art?
At the beginning, I was drawing like comic books and that kind of continued into high school, and it switched from, but actually even um I would say late grade school and early middle school, it became like I started thinking about it like a career, like a comic book artist, you know what I mean? And I would like look at that world. And then it just, that was sort of overtaken by the academic stuff of high school, and you know what I mean, still life and figure, figure drawing and portraiture, or, fine art of any kind. And started to kind of look into that. But yeah, again, I still didn't know anything at all about like, um, you know, full time in the fine arts. You know what I mean? I could understand the idea of like being an illustrator or doing work in design, or, you know what I mean, graphic design, but the idea of like the art world and or I guess that portion of the art world, buying and selling art and all that was completely foreign to me, even up until the time of grad school, really. Like just wasn't I didn't know much about that. So
Yeah, when I was a teenager, I really started focusing on making art that kind of talked about things I was going through in my life. And then when I was in undergrad for college, I minored in art, painting, and really started to express myself and make connections with other artists and figure out that I could communicate things I wanted to about my life with cystic fibrosis and other things I felt like needed to be talked about through art. And I thought it was kind of a unique situation for me because um, I was in the hospital a lot. So it gave me time to kind of think and be quiet and really contemplate the ideas and concepts I wanted to explore in my art. And then, start to express those in my studio and through my work. And that kind of changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do with my life at that point around, I'd say early 20s.
Why is art good for the soul?
yeah, I believe art is good for the soul in more ways than we could think to count. But if I were to try to count some of the ways, certainly the realms of art therapy, healing, mental health, physical health, I believe it contributes to all those things. But um, in my many hospital stays and my many, medical adventures, what I would always bring art into the hospital rooms and, working on art or having, other pieces in the room. And one of the many doctors said to me, what we do as physicians is keeping people alive, but like what you're doing is like a reason to be alive. And I thought, yeah, that's that's a good way to, phrase it. So it is speaking to the physical. It's speaking to, the sort of temporary natures of things, the momentary, but it's speaking beyond that, and it's investigating, asking questions beyond that. And so physical and metaphysical, soul, spirit, body, mind, heart. It's the whole shebang bang. I'm really into art as a way to dive into the just breadth of what it could mean to be human.
I think art is definitely good for the soul. For me specifically, it was a way to both keep my imagination active and keep conversations going that I thought were important to my life with other people, making an expressive drawing how I was feeling. Because, like you can tell somebody you're in pain or tell somebody that it's hard to breathe, but can they really understand that and empathize with that? I think that's a really important question. Language can only do so much, right? So I think art offers a whole nother level of connecting with people. And to me, connecting with people is ultimately what is best for my soul. And I think I do that through art and seeing other people's expressions through art also helps me relate to them. And it's just a whole nother language where I think you can create aesthetic relationships and concepts that are more multi-layered than just verbal language, which I think fails to capture a lot of uh, aspects of living with a chronic illness or having CF or being hospitalized and getting a transplant, like all these really, really heavy topics. Sometimes when you talk about them verbally, people can, zone out, space out. They don't want to, fully grasp exactly what you're talking about. So I think art really captures that.
Actually walking through an art gallery rather than viewing art online, why is it such a unique format for art lovers to enjoy new art and artists?
Well, on the surface level, it is important to experience art in person versus online because you can see things that you can't see online, details, scale. There's a variety of things you can't quite fully experience online that you can in person. Details, aspects of the work that you can, be it performative or visual or whatever, that you can't necessarily see online. But in addition to that, I think the presence of certainly the installation of a show or the whole theater of a performance or the immersive experience is unparalleled. And to be in I certainly think of it for visual art, to be in the same space, distance from a work that the creator was from it, and experiencing the height, the positioning, how it draws you in, all those things, um, the relational aesthetics, the totality of the experience is really critical. So you get some of that online. I value seeing things online. You know what I mean? It's important and helpful in some ways, but the fullness of the experience, to be sure, in person offers a variety of things that online doesn't.
I think online has been really important for art and for me specifically. I think the CF community in general is a pretty interesting way to stay connected with other CF people. So it kind of served two purposes for me. Like when I was in my early teens in the mid 90s, they started come up with the 3-foot rule and then the 6-foot rule, where cystic fibrosis patients had to be that far apart. And then they started to create these rules around, only one person with CF could be in a room at a time. So there was a lot of isolationism with that. And so with the formation of a lot of these online communities, I stayed really connected with CF people that I may have never met, or maybe met once or twice in real life, but was able to share what I was going through. And I think in terms of art and getting your art out there and exposure like that, making something in your studio and posting on Instagram or Twitter or X, like sites like that, and sharing them, you can create a larger dialogue around your work. It's a little hard to see some of the textures and some of the depth and structure of things online, but in general, I think it's a pretty good tool for artists, especially when the in-person audience is a lot smaller than what you can reach online.
When did you first realize you had cystic fibrosis, and how did you both physically and mentally deal with that knowledge?
Yeah, so I think I was diagnosed at 3 months old. This is in 1982, right? So CF was still relatively a new diagnosis. There wasn't that much in terms of treatment, and prognosis was always not very good, right? Like I feel like every CF person from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s has that story where they were told by their doctor, or their parents were told by their doctor, that they were going to die. They weren't going to live past 12 or 15 or 20 or whatever it was, right? So I kind of always knew that I was in and out of the hospital. And then I think as I got older, around 8, 9, 10, around that age, I started to fully realize, like, okay, I have this genetic disorder, this disease that affected my lungs. I knew that because I was always getting pneumonia. I was always coughing. I remember a lot of my early birthdays, I loved baseball, and my birthday's in April, where there's a lot of allergies and it starts to get humid, and I would have CF exacerbations and pneumonia on my birthday, like every year. So when I had my birthday parties, my friends would we would play baseball, and I would, or wiffle ball, and I would bat, but my friends would have to run the bases for me because I was too, coughing too much or too short of breath. So I kind of always knew there was something going on with my lungs. And then, when I was in 6th grade, so that's like, 11, 12 years old, I started to fully realize the impact, because I was having a lot of hemoptysis, coughing up blood, and I was in the hospital for like the last month of the school year. I missed like the spree day and all those, saying goodbye to my friends for the year before the summer. And that's kind of really when it started to set in that, this was a pretty serious disease, and that's what I had. So
I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at 3 months old, and so my earliest memories, I don't have any memories of not, carrying cystic fibrosis. Early on in childhood, I did, fairly well. Was able to do sports up until middle school, really, high school. I was able to kind of um, play, run, would have to do hospital stays, would have to, do medications and treatments, but was able to kind of manage it. And so early on, it was kind of a defiant, like this is not a big deal. And then, not surprisingly, as middle school and high school came around, it became more of a deal. Started to do more regular inpatient hospital stays. Um, but still, just sort of like managed it. This is what it is. And that kind of through college, even as my lung function started to slowly go down, college and grad school, I never talked about it, never made artwork about it, never brought it up, didn't want attention on that, didn't want pity, didn't want, all the not uncommon things for a CF patient or anybody with chronic illness from a young age. And not until then I got married and I had kids. And even with that, still, didn't talk about it much. Not until I was being evaluated for lung transplant did I start to speak around it. Maybe just a little bit before that, but I started to bring it in conversations, talk with people about it more, and include it in the artwork that I was making. At that point, it felt sort of dishonest for me to not bring it in some way, and so I leaned into it pretty hard, actually. So once that happened, so.
Before we go any further, there are many people who don't know what cystic fibrosis is. In your own words, can you explain what CF is and tell us about your day-to-day experience dealing with this unique orphan disease?
Yeah, I think cystic fibrosis is, it's a genetic disease. I feel like everyone's kind of heard of it because there's been so much awareness and there's been a lot of research and breakthroughs for CF over the course of my lifetime. But uh, they, my experience growing up with telling people I had CF is, they always kind of been like, oh, you cough a lot, or I can see like your fingers look weird because of the clubbing, like you have a lot of pulmonary diseases. You get, larger fingertips because of the circulation issues and oxygenation and things. So that kind of always like had those visible markers, and then the coughing, of course. But I tell people it's like my lungs were always clogged up with mucus, and I'd cough, and I took pills when I ate to help me digest fat, and yeah. But I think like everyone's always like, oh yeah, like I knew somebody with CF, or my friend's brother had CF. It was always kind of like that at a distance thing. And then when people would meet me, they'd be like, oh, like seeing CF actually lived out. And I think their experience with me, and I tried to play sports when I was younger. I played baseball and hockey and ran cross country. I wasn't really ever that great at anything, but I was participating, right? And so I think that was a situation where people were like, oh, I didn't know people with CF could play sports, or I didn't know they looked like that. So, which is looking, relatively normal, invisible illness mostly, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so cystic fibrosis is a degenerative chronic illness that a genetic disease that attacks every system of the body, but often primarily respiratory and digestive. And in terms of respiratory, causes infection and scarring in the lungs, the degree to which lung transplant is often a path for CF patients, as it was for me, 2 times over. So two different lung transplants. And so prior to lung transplants, it was breathing treatments every day, then eventually twice a day, then eventually 3 times a day, sometimes 4, hours and hours of inhaled therapies and airway clearance vests, clapping, and trying to do exercise as much as you could to keep infection out of your lungs, try to keep the lungs clear, keep phlegm and mucus. With CF, it's an excess, it builds an excess of mucus in your lungs that kind of get trapped in there and cause more infection and cause more scarring. So post-transplant, I don't have to do any breathing treatments, and I take medication to suppress immune system, antibiotics to supplement that, but can breathe well, breathe fully, exercise more freely, and not have to do airway clearance treatments.
When did you decide to start incorporating your cystic fibrosis into your art pieces?
When I was in undergraduate work, making undergraduate work, I started to, again, like when I was in 6th grade, I had a lot of hemoptysis, and I had a bunch of embolizations where they go in and they basically, like, from the inside, cauterize those places in my lungs that were bleeding a lot. So I had 3 or 4 of those when I was in my 12 through 14, and then I kind of stabilized for a few years, and then the hemoptysis started again when I was in college. And at the time, I was studying art and just kind of maybe relatively generic art making, and then I started having more and more significant health problems. I was missing some school, and when I came back after being in the hospital for about 3 weeks with a massive hemoptysis, I started making paintings about that experience, and they were kind of, visceral, and I used oil paint and sand and making it textured and with a lot of dripping paint and kind of gothic and gory looking. And people started like asking, like, why did my work look like that? And I started noticing art was an entryway into discussing these more difficult topics about my own life and health. And to me, I think it started to become a rich source of content in my work. So that's kind of that, I was about maybe 19, 20 years old. And that's kind of where I started going. I started studying like Bay Area figurative painting from Northern California in the 1950s, artists like Elmer Bischoff and David Park, and the way they use light and space to frame figuration. And I started doing that in my own work, but I was kind of making it, these like deformed bodies and like these bodies that were kind of melting and being ripped apart from the lungs. And, so that's kind of where I started incorporating my own lived experience with CF and debility and disability in my art.
Well, yeah, I started to incorporate my health journey into artwork as I was starting to be evaluated for transplant, as a way of just being honest and vulnerable, I think. And I had not done that for so long that it felt a little dishonest to not bring it in at some point. So I did. And when I did, it was this sort of cathartic release of, all these stories and symbols and, things to talk about. It was just sort of this endless, endless options of things to speak on. And so I started to do that, and then seeing people's reaction. Before I made artwork that was primarily around the ideas of prayer and faith, and especially how that operated in the public sphere, where people believe different things and think different things, and come from different perspectives. How it was very much about the idea of faith expression amidst cultural divides and a plethora of opinions. which was interesting and compelling work. It got interesting reactions, got a lot of strong reactions, a lot of press, a lot of opinionated reactions, but became more of a academic discussion about topics of prayer, about topics of faith. And when I entered into doing work about my own health, the conversation and reaction and emotion around viewing my work was more personal, in the sense that people were responding to my own journey of faith, my own doubt, my own, vulnerability, my own prayers. And, I just found that discussion to be a lot more compelling.
Yeah, so over the course of my art career, I've been doing a lot of experimentation. I think that's important to my work, both for keeping myself interested and entertained, but also kind of, I think, living out a subconscious where I have felt like, I felt like like a test or somebody that's been experimented on throughout my life. Just like, with all the advancements with cystic fibrosis research and treatment and all the new medications coming out from Vertex. But growing up in the 80s and early 90s, I was part of a lot of those studies. I'm from the Boston area, and there's a lot of the research in the biomedical industry was being in the area. I was part of a lot of teaching hospitals growing up, so I had a lot of student nurses and doctors coming in as part of my treatment, and I was part of some supposedly cures, um, or tests and studies for cures in the late 90s, where you would inhale a dead virus, and that's when like hypertonic saline and the vest and all these advancements in like personal care, rather than having a respiratory therapist do physical chest PT on you, and they replaced that with the vest. And so I was part of a lot of those studies. So I feel like experimentation kind of naturally just grew into my art practice because I was living that experience. So I work in series where I come up with a concept, an idea for a series of work, and I make multiples of something, like maybe 3 or 5 or 7 or sometimes 10. And I kind of explore 1 or 2 concepts through a series. And then once I kind of figure it out, I move on to another series. So that's kind of how my practice has been going. And it's not medium specific. I work in drawing, painting, video art, performance art. I kind of let the idea dictate what the work will look like and what mediums I need to use, but also my physical ability plays a lot into how the work is made. Um, if I'm thinking about making a specific project, if my health isn't that good at the time, then the work is going to be made maybe with performance art, with using my own body, or made with photography and video art, because it's less physically demanding than making a huge painting with wooden stretcher bars. Or so, yeah, like the levels of debility I've faced throughout my life with cystic fibrosis, especially pre-transplant, when I was, sometimes in a wheelchair on full-time oxygen, doing the vest treatments 4 times a day, like all those times when my debility was at its highest. I had severe disability with that, waiting for transplant. I did a lot of performance art using my own body, using my medical equipment as um, collaborators in my performances. Um, yeah.
When did you first hear about the proposed art exhibit, Breathtaking, a group show of artists with cystic fibrosis, and why did you have to be part of this unique exhibit?
So I had an idea for an exhibition, and we had talked about it with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation chapters of Los Angeles and Orange County, which are now just one Southern California chapter of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. But it was a difficult finding a space became a key issue. They found some spaces to do something like this in, but the spaces were more for like a gala or a fundraiser or something like that. There weren't walls really, to the spaces that they were finding. So it wasn't going to work as an art exhibition. And then my friend Ted, who works at USC, he's a curator at USC, and curates art, art shows around health and medicine. Put me in touch with Pam, who is the owner of DnJ Gallery, the gallery had been closed for a few years since COVID, and she wanted to reopen with a series of shows related to different health issues, and wanted the first one to be around cystic fibrosis. So it became this perfect, collision of events that the gallery space was available. There was the backing of the foundation to do the show, and they helped support some of the transportation of artists, from the US and abroad. And so then it was just a matter of putting the show together and selecting artists. We put a call out and, knew of 10 or so artists already, put a call out for extra artists, got 18 artists in the show total, and filled up the gallery with all that work. So that was kind of the path.
Tell us about your art pieces in the new art exhibit, Breathtaking.
Yeah, I have two works in Breathtaking. I have Donor Recipient, which is a fabric work from 2023. And that is kind of just visually describing it. It's a wall hanging made out of sewn hospital gowns. One of them is painted and then drawn on with graphite. So it's painted red and then with a lot of mark making graphite. And then it's sewn and cut to look like a torso. And then the lung area, I basically cut out and then filled that in with two deflated balloons that just hang there. And then it's framed by sewing hospital gowns around the torso. So it's kind of like a hanging rectangle with a floating red torso and two balloons where the lungs are. That was a work that I was thinking about my experience with transplantation and the kind of anonymity of my donor and the breathlessness of being having lung failure and chronic lung failure and then acute lung failure later as I approached actually getting my transplant. And like this ability to blow up a balloon and balloons kind of signifying like especially a blue balloon, we as a American society, celebrate the birth of a boy with a blue balloon, or, a birthday, you have balloons. And so like the celebratory nature of what a balloon can signify, but also they're hung upside down and shriveled and deflated. So it's like this, almost like letting the air out of this celebration. And that's kind of my experience with transplantation. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance. There was a lot of high energy emotional content with my transplant. I was the subject of a lot of like, hey, we're thinking about you. We're sending prayers. We're sending love. We're wishing and hoping and praying you get your new lungs. So I was the object of a lot of attention for almost 3 years, for over 3 years. That's how long I was on the waiting list for transplant. People I went to school with, like when I was, 5 years old, found me on Facebook and was like, I heard you're dying and you need new lungs, right? Like, so all these people I ever met in my life were like reaching out. So it was like this really high vibration of attention and care. And, but it was always like this dark underside of that. Like, am I going to survive this? Is my life like some kind of inspiration for other people, like this kind of story about what trying to get a life-saving transplant is. And so that kind of deflation of the lung, of the balloons and stuff, kind of talked towards that. And then again, like the hospital gowns, the anonymity of patient after patient wearing those in the hospital. And so like the construction of this work using the gowns and the torso being, both me embodied as a recipient and the lungs coming from an anonymous person's torso. So it's like, and then the patchwork of sewing them all together, kind of quilt-like, recycled material, and reuse and recycle the hospital gowns, the painting scraps, and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a culmination of that experience. And then the other piece is called 65 Roses, a nod to like the charitable story of that the boy who hears his mom talking on the phone with his doctor, and he says, I heard you said I have 65 roses. What does that mean? And she said, no, you have cystic fibrosis. Like that kind of, is that a real story? Is that CF folklore? Like I really love that. Like I feel like it is a real story that, there's source material out there that can confirm that. But to me, it's always been part folklore, right? So when we had the opportunity to do this show of cystic fibrosis artists, I wanted to make a new work for that. So I made the 65 Roses, which is literally 65 roses in a vase. And the vase is made out of moving blankets. And the roses are made by coloring hospital gowns with red colored pencils. And then I rolled them and folded them into roses and then sewed them on. So it's like a big bouquet of 65 roses. And then the moving blanket comes in. It's kind of another material, textile fabric that kind of talks about these transitional states of high emotional labor and physical labor where you're going to move, right? So you have all these memories from the past, and you have this intense physical labor in the moment. You may call on friends to help you move. You may call a moving company. And then the anxiety and also hope of the future. You're going to move somewhere, and there's excitement, but also that kind of bittersweetness of leaving the past and present into the unknown of the future. So to me, the moving blanket represents all of those things, as does the hospital gowns, right? And so tying those together, it's like this experience of cystic fibrosis, this like living through transition and turmoil and on and off debility and disability and labor and struggle and things like that, and reliance on your community, your family, your caretakers, the interdependence of that, but also that hope for independence and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's kind of what those two works represent.
So as you come in the space of the gallery, the first piece is why doesn't the bush burn up? And is a bronchial tree formation that some people read visually as bronchial branches. I mean, it looks like a tree or tree branches, but it could be veins or arteries. It could be, different systems of the body. And then kind of composed of different circles. It's basically circles of glitter with paint, kind of squeeze bottle application surrounding all these circles of glitter to create this effect. So the circles kind of loosely represent the idea of cells. So again, this collision of bronchial tree and cells, again, these two things that have I've looked at visually in so many different ways, and it is either not gone well or gone really well post-transplant. And look, the scans look good, the numbers look good. Oh, they don't look good again. They, everything's going good again too. Everything is looking good again. Everything is going well. So, back to the spiritual references, kind of referencing the burning bush of Moses in the wilderness. Why doesn't that why isn't it burning up? There's all forecasted throughout my life was that, I would have, the average lifespan of CF was 14 years when I was born, and I'm 44 now. So to the question of why doesn't the bush burn up? Like, how do I keep surviving? How is it that I'm alive despite all this fire, around me? So that's that piece. The next piece over is, we can only receive what we have been given, and is a fusion. This is kind of what I've been doing a lot since we recently moved to California about 2 years ago, creating these paintings that are a fusion of medical equipment. So in this piece, it's dangling cords and medical wires and IV bags and IV poles kind of in the background, overlapped by flora and fauna, exotic plant life, that I see more in the Southern California area, and also just thinking of like a tropical paradise, and again, smashing those two realities together. So one of the earlier versions of that, I did like these surgery scenes in this like jungle of, lush, exotic plant life. And so again, speaking to the feeling of, that fine line of like, these are traumatic, terrible events, and yet they're in this sort of paradise, in this joy, and so both of those are happening simultaneously. The third piece in the gallery is self-portrait with an IV pole, which is like a portrait of me in a hospital gown, with my face kind of completely covered by bags from the IV pole that I'm holding. Which and there is some of that plant life that I just spoke of mixed in with that as well, with that piece. But that piece in its essence is kind of about a portrait of myself rendered by the literal overwhelming of medicine and carrying the weight of all these IV bags, all this medication, such a degree that you cannot see my face behind it. And so, as I've mentioned earlier, about speaking to the beauty of like how all this equipment has helped and saved me, how it has also simultaneously felt overwhelming and crushing, that it's overtaken me almost, and yet I live on. So that's a piece, and then two smaller pieces. One is a tree trunk, which is really kind of thinking about my donor and my bronchial tree both through the process of transplant. Both transplants are cut at the trunk of the tree to replace the bronchial tree. And so for a time, at least, my donor's bronchial tree and mine cut the sort of branch of the the trunk of the bronchial tree remaining. And so that piece is kind of thinking about that. It's called the taking tree. And so it really kind of has to deal with the weight of kind of survivor's guilt, and, the unfairness of how is it that I'm alive, but my donor is not. And the weight, just kind of the weight of that. And then another piece is a Air Jordan Nike sneaker that is a symbol I will use often, because there's air inside the shoes, akin to air being inside the lungs, and the shoes sort of have a shape similar to lungs itself. And so all these parallels, as anyone would look at a shoe like that for athletics or fashion, I'm adding the component of air that is in the shoes as a life source. So looking to that symbol of that shoe, like coveting those shoes like you would for athletics or fashion. Here I'm coveting like literal breath and life. And so that's what those symbols are about. So that's what's in the show.
Yeah, some of the themes I see in the show are definitely hope. I think that's a big one. And especially anytime you're in a show with Dylan, that hope will be involved, right? He's really big on that. Just I know like sick and disabled people hate being inspirational, but for me, Dylan's inspirational. So I don't mean any offense to that by that, but yeah. So I think hope is definitely a big one, but I think the resourcefulness and this drive to be communal through isolation, which kind of doesn't seem like it makes sense, but I think if you walk through the show, you get that sense. Like the human spirit of wanting to be in community, and the human spirit as a social being, both through art making, which is essentially a social act, right? You're making something to show someone else, but also the drive, the interdependent drive of CF patients and their caretakers and the medical communities. I think that's a powerful thing within the CF community, very specifically, that we are a group that rallies around each other and does a lot of fundraising, does a lot of research, does a lot of outreach. It's very impactful, I think, over the last 30 years of what the CF Foundation has done and what each individual chapter. When I was growing up, my mom was the sponsor and the organizer of our local Great Strides walk. So we would do a 5K walk around my local town to raise money for CF. This is in like the 80s and early 90s, mid 90s. And all these things throughout the whole country accumulated over the last 20, 30 years, and now are bringing the CF modulators, Trikafta and those kind of things, because of that communal spirit and that sense of caretaking as a community. So I think that also comes across in the show really strongly, something very specific to, I think, to the show and the CF community.
So being at the actual gallery of the breathtaking art exhibit, just tell me your thoughts and perspective when you finally saw it all put together.
Yeah, when I saw the work all in the gallery together, it was a really amazing moment, because for 3 or 4 months, Dylan and I we were having Zoom conversations. We were talking about what we could do in the space, what the space. I'm right currently near Boston, and Dylan is in LA, so he was able to see the space in person, and so I was only seeing blueprints of the gallery and photos of the gallery. We did a little video walkthrough, but you can never really kind of judge the spatial feel of something unless you're there in the space. So, and then chatting with the other artists over Instagram or Zoom. We did a few meetings with Sarah Cross, who helped organize the exhibit as well, and with Ted Meyer and Pam Schoenberg, the gallery owner. So we were having a lot of these Zoom meetings, but you can never really necessarily know or tell how the show is going to come out. So I got there on day 2 of the install, and most of the work was already up, and we were kind of cleaning up the walls and putting up the labels, and so yeah, just seeing it from there come together, I was like, whoa, like, this is amazing. It really came out amazing. I feel like I'm using amazing a lot, but I feel yeah, it was great. So overwhelming too, like this sense of pride that that we made this happen, and all these other artists were willing to trust us with their work and trust our judgment and to represent them. We wanted to really make sure we respected and represented their work strongly, and could give them something they could be proud of, and also the made me a little it made me emotional too, about the sense of community that we brought together, and the shared experience of all our individual experiences, which a lot of times includes heavy levels of isolation. We could bring that all together and be in community with each other, and inform each other too. Like my work contextualize Dylan's work and Bob Flanagan's work, and Rowan with some amazing photographs of her with her wheelchair and oxygen tanks, and yeah, and just being all in conversation with each other in the same gallery space was really impressive. And more emotional than I expected it to be for myself.
I just thought of this question. I'm not sure it makes sense. Would you say in some interesting way it shows shows the full and many aspects of dealing with cystic fibrosis? Just walking around the gallery.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good um, survey, I'd say, of what it can be like living with CF. Especially, most of the artists are, which is interestingly enough, like I think Rowan's probably in her early 20s, but like 20s to 45, right? So that's like a 20-year period, and we're kind of like the last generation of CF people that are not, or that grew up without the modulators like Trikafta from Vertex, right? So that was an interesting overview of kind of what it's been like to grow up dealing with the struggles of CF and a body in revolt a lot, right? So you have a lot of the medical equipment in there. You have a lot of the mucus and dark humor, and um, there's it all looks really good too, which I think is really exciting. So you want to look at it. It's not anything that's like overly like, ooh, I can't look at that because it's too gross. So I think the artists, we all do a good job of making the work accessible from those point of view, where you can kind of at least come into the work, and then the themes get a little darker from there, but at least, we're giving that kind of entryway. And I think as people with CF, we do that anyways, right? We kind of use the invisibility of CF to function in the world, and then we do all the nasty private stuff in private. And so I think the work reflects that element of living with CF really importantly as well too. And yeah, so I think it does show a lot of the aspects of that, and I think it's a very successful show in that way.
My experience was just a lot of joy. I mean, really, from the vantage point of putting the show together, there's three spaces in the gallery, three rooms, and I thought we could probably get enough to fill one room, but we easily filled all three and had to, not include every piece that was submitted. And so that was really encouraging and really joyful to see the amount of work, the quality of the work. So many of these artists have been to art school, and just, are young or haven't really exhibited much. And so opportunity and seeing everyone's reaction within that has been amazing. So that's amazing. As far as themes within, um, there's such a variety. There are a few that pull in some literal, even literal materials from hospital and the vernacular of medication or IV bags and such. There's some of that. There's some that work in a very figurative way, in a very, and then there's some that work in a very abstract way, and some, there's all kinds of media, sculpture, mixed media, fabric, um, painting, drawing, photography, video. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a range. So I think all of that was fantastic to see, and there is an emotional range for sure, from speaking to the anxiety, fear, mental health, death, decay, going down that road. Some like mine, kind of speaking to the hope, speaking to the overcoming, speaking to the victory, and then everything kind of in between. So a lot of beautiful themes for sure.
Yeah, I think Dylan and I both talked about this a lot. The we wanted the visitors, the viewers, to come into the show and just see the breadth of talent and creativity that each individual and as a collective, the cystic fibrosis artist community, they have, right? So we wanted everyone to kind of put work in the show that highlighted their own personal practices, that represented their own personal lived experience with CF. So I think we were really specifically focused on making sure the art represented the best in what each artist offered. So there's amazing video documentary from Max McGuire, a filmmaker from Canada. There's amazing illustrations from Eliza. She's from Spain, where she's like best friends with a mucus blob that takes on a personification and follows her everywhere on a mini bike, swimming, running through a field at school, right? And that's like very specific to her because she made the art, but also like a universal thing within CF, right? The experience of coughing up these phlegm balls, and you have a relationship with your own mucus, right? It's like you can tell how sick you are by the color of the mucus. Like, oh, like it's a dark green week, I got to call the doctor. Or if it's yellow, you're like, okay, I'm still good, right? So like I think each artist, even we did a historical reach back, and we included some work by Bob Flanagan, a poem and a photograph from his show Visiting Hours at the New Museum, where he's in a wheelchair with Cherie Rose, and he's on oxygen. And it's like these personalized experiences from each artist, but there is some universal truths within the CF community in a lot of the work. So we thought that was really important to do that. And we picked work that was already existing from each person's practice.
Are there additional themes in your art pieces beyond dealing with cystic fibrosis?
Yeah, there are additional themes in what I'm creating too than dealing with cystic fibrosis. I mean, all of that is present, but it's I hope for it not primarily to end with being about cystic fibrosis. I describe it as like I describe this a lot about transplant life, but I'd say all of CF too, that it often feels like the front row in the theater of reality. Like everybody's in the same theater, you know what I mean? Just sometimes situations of life kind of put you on the front row and everything's really loud and seems really, so when you are faced with a prognosis of an early death, or, everybody contends with mortality. It's just, from what place in the arena are you viewing the show? And so sometimes you're way up front and everything's loud and you see everything real clear, and sometimes you might feel way back and it's not as up close. So when I'm speaking to CF in my artwork, I'm really speaking about mortality and what do you do in light of that? What does life look like? What does hope look like? Specifically when there seems to be no reason to hope.
For my work, I think like I don't ever overly hope for the audience to get anything out of it, because if I do that, then I'm going to be chasing something that may be impossible through, but in terms of like the things I think about while I'm making the work is, can they relate to the object that I'm showing, right? So that's why I like take a lot of the hospital materials and I shape them into something. So over the years, I've gotten off of the square or rectangle format that a traditional painting is in, and I've started to shape the wall hangings. So they'll be like in the show, there's a torso and there's a bouquet of roses, right? So I think the entryway for me is always like a relatable object. And then so you see it from across the gallery and you're like, oh, that's like a interesting representation of bouquet of flowers. And as you get closer, as the viewer gets closer, the work starts to reveal darker truths, that it's made out of hospital gowns and moving blankets, and it's talking about some darker topics. And then you can start to examine the mark making and the coloring that I've done. You can see parts of the gowns or like the tags that you can kind of read, or you might even see like some dust or dirt or something, because moving blankets have been on the ground, or there might be a little drop of blood on the gown that was left over from something. So you start to get closer and examine. And I think what I do as an artist who's had a lot of experimentation and a lot of experience with living with an invisible illness, people, to know that I have CF, you have to get to know me, and I reveal that over time. I do that with my artwork too. So you look at it from across the gallery, you see this object or the shape of something that you can kind of relate to, and as you get closer, it starts to reveal that it's some commentary on sickness or disease or the healthcare system or something, because of the use of medical materials and things like that. So there's that uncovering the invisibility of it, I think, is something that I want. And then the other thing is like using the gowns. Like there's a notion of like coincidence that can come up, where you might have a relationship with the actual gown itself. Some people have told me, like, I didn't know from across the room because it was colored, but as I got closer, I noticed it was a hospital gown, and I recognized it because my grandfather, he was sick or had open heart surgery or something, and he wore that gown, and so it's very prominent in my memory. And so there's some obscuring of that from a distance, but as you get closer, you get a more intimate experience, and you might have these coincidental moments that you can share with the work. And so that's kind of like a string or a thread that I hope that can come out at some point with individual viewers.
Tell us why this is such an important and unique art exhibit to go see in Southern California.
Yeah, so I know that there have been shows elsewhere in the world before that, cystic fibrosis artists have been in, but in terms of a gallery in LA, I would not know of one. I know that there have been cystic fibrosis artists in shows, but all that to say, it's the first of its kind that I know of, to collect 18 artists who are CF fighters that create lived experience, work around their lived experience from around the world in this show. So to say that it's unique would be an understatement. I think it's a really good look globally at contending through a chronic illness like CF. And specifically at a moment where we have gone, in my lifetime, from average lifespan of 14 to average lifespan of late 50s. So people are starting to not only survive, but have to ask questions about significance and purpose, and, what will they do with their life now that they have it? And so this exhibition is kind of a testament to that, a testament to possibility in life. And of course, I would hope all of that be an inspiration to other rare disease communities and chronic illness sufferers, and also just people, like people in general who are in any way wrestling with hope and looking for possibility beyond what they could imagine in their minds.
What do you think will surprise the art gallery visitor about the art exhibit Breathtaking?
I think the biggest surprise probably is the humor, like the dark humor that is involved in a lot of the work. I think there's a strong seriousness to a lot of the work, but a lot of it has dark humor in it too. And I think that's a really strong theme across a lot of the work. And the experimentation of all the work too, I think is interesting. There's a lot of different mediums. There's a lot of different use of materials, different presentations of different topics. And so I think, like, for me specifically, I can speak from my own experience. A lot of my work is kind of funny and in dark ways, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily think that a bouquet of roses would, be made out of hospital gowns. And there's some green nitrile gloves that kind of drop down behind the flowers that are there, like the flowers, leaves and stuff. But that's kind of a goofy way to make a bouquet of roses, right? And you make them out of these like really serious and heavy materials. And to me, that's kind of funny. It's like you're revealing like these little inside jokes. And I think a lot of the other artists do similar things with that.
Yeah, I think even I think everybody, and including even the people that are in the CF community, know the CF community really well, will be surprised by the resolve and fight and, stamina, energy, the will, like the human will to survive and the human will to thrive and the human heart to, you know, in the face of such daunting odds and in the face of such difficult or really, really hard path, CF is it's a difficult diagnosis to carry. And so to see such beauty created in spite of that is, even I was surprised. I mean, it's like I've known all these artists, I've known most of the artists and seen some of the work before, but yeah, sort of surprised by joy to see all that come together in one space was really beautiful.
This gallery showing you are selling the art images, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So how can they only buy it if they're there? Can they buy it online? And the most important thing, if someone, more than one person, which I'm assuming will happen, wants to buy your piece of art, is it a bidding process or is it a commission process?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so all sales are, all the artwork is uniquely created. So once one person buys it, that's the, that's it. But they can buy things online. The in person would be a little easier, but all of it, whether online or in person, is really just a conversation with the individual artist. This is a unique case where the gallery is not taking any percentage of sales, which is never happens in the gallery world. But the gallery has been very gracious in that we are so when if somebody wants to buy a piece, they talk directly with the artist. So the gallery puts them in touch if they're not already in touch with the artist to work out the sale and pay the artist, by whatever means works. We're suggesting a 30% donation back to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation of any work sold. So, that's just to help support the CF Foundation that made the show happen. So that's how it works.
Why should or must the SoCal community attend the art exhibit Breathtaking?
Yes, the SoCal community should attend the exhibit Breathtaking to see a one-of-a-kind exhibition of artists from around the world as a testimony to overcoming a rare disease that is having impact on other diseases as well. Speaking specifically to a moment of within a lifetime going from, average lifespan being 14 to 20 to being 50 to 60. So it's a testament to hope. It's a testament to courage. It's a testament to possibility and creation. It's a creation out of nothing kind of thing. Our lives were forecasted and meant to be nothing, and they're not only not nothing. It's not only survival, but it's thriving in every sense of the world. And what. In my mind, I think kind of what is more privileged than creating artwork? You know what I mean? Like to go from just sort of a lack to fullness, and fullness, the degree to which creating, both in response to the difficulties and in the joy of still being alive and having come so far, and for so many doing better than ever before. It's also a testament for those struggling, and speaking to the hope that has yet to be realized. So all those kind of things are happening in one space. Is well worth the visit.
Yeah, I think this SoCal community, the Southern California community should definitely see this breathtaking, because it offers a look into a disease that has had so many advancements in terms of research, fundraising, community, and I think it's an amazing case study in what it can be, what community can look like through all of those facets to help people as a project in caretaking on multiple levels, to nearly eradicate a disease, overcome almost insurmountable odds, right? From when I was born in 1982, where CF, I was given, maybe 10, 15 years of life expectancy, and the treatment was, just throw some antibiotics at him and let him hack his brains out, to now you have medications that you can take that, while you're taking the medication, regulate your cells so they work in function like they're supposed to. And kids that are being born now might not have any long-term debility or disability with cystic fibrosis. It's much more manageable, and I think that's a really unique situation with cystic fibrosis. And I think if you come to breathtaking, get that you get that sense, you can feel that, and that can impact your life in other ways. So I think it's a very important show to see.
Definitely want people to come and check out the gallery all the
Yeah.
time during this event. But
A good, yeah.
But talk about the last day where a lot of the artists are coming
Yeah.
back.
Well, yeah, a good day to check out the exhibition would be to come on the last day on June 22nd from 12 to 4, where we'll have a closing reception for the exhibition, where some of the artists will be there. I mean, I know I will be there, and the last day of the show, and just to, a kind of fun time to see some of the artists, some of the in the show itself.
As you know, art isn't cheap to create.
Yes, I've heard. Yeah.
So, how can the SoCal art community help support the gallery mission and these individual artists too?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say maybe, yeah, just by participating in the art community, seeing art, supporting artists, word of mouth, talking about the show, doing great interviews like this, and promoting the show, buying artwork, or if you can't afford artwork on the walls, you ask an artist like, "Hey, do you have smaller drawings or prints that I could buy," or things like that, or yeah, that kind of thing. It's tough being an artist, and it's tough being an artist with a chronic illness and disease and a disability, because like trying to figure out ways to make income, and also having time to take care of your body and your health, and also taking time to work and when you can work. And so it's a significant thing to be an artist. And so anyways you can support, really. I'm not really sure if I answered that question very well, but yeah, buy art, I guess, is probably the best way to do it.
Yes, the larger community can support artists by going to the shows, following them on their social media pages and online, purchasing artwork, and messages of encouragement. I mean, there are so many ways, and I think these artists would be so greatly encouraged by any or all of those. So, making an effort to go to the community, or being, engaging with it online in any way, looking at images, following artists, seeing what they're doing, listening to stories, all well worth the time, and all hugely supportive to these artists. They are thrilled to be in this show, all of them, whether they've exhibited a lot or exhibited a little. It's quite a victorious exhibition.
Anything else you want to mention about the gallery the exhibit or the CF Foundation?
I don't know. I feel like the CF Foundation has been, it has played a big time role in my life, even though I don't have any like personal relationships with CF. Like Dylan is really amazing with doing all that. He has a lot of personal relationships with people at the foundation and individual chapters, and he's really amazing at seeking that out and fostering those relationships. I'm not as good as doing that. So, but even having said that, the CF Foundation has been huge in my life, just through the support they give the institutions of CF, the clinics, and the fundraising opportunities they've had, the medical and pharmaceutical companies that they've supported and given money to and helped fund research and things like that. I know I don't have as much experience with other diseases, but to me, cystic fibrosis, when you're diagnosed with that, you enter into like a secondary family, and there's a lot of resources now that there weren't around when I was a kid, for CF families and patients, and I hope that that sense of community can be felt by other parents and caretakers and patients with CF that are might be struggling with that. There are definitely a lot of us out there, and I think in the show too, I think that sense of community and a welcoming is there. Like nobody wants to be diagnosed with basically a terminal illness, but when you are, I feel like the cystic fibrosis community and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation are one of the best support systems that you can find.
I would just add, huge thanks to DNJ Gallery. That was really forward thinking to have this show. Just really proud of their faith and faith leap to do a show like this, and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for supporting, and all the artists for sending their work from around the world and around the country to be a part of this. So yeah, really grateful to be a part of it all.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominic Quagliozzi, a visual artist from Massachusetts. I currently have work on display at DNJ Gallery in Los Angeles with a show called Breathtaking. It's 17 artists with cystic fibrosis, artists selected by myself and Dylan Mortimer. And we hope you come down, check out the show. You get a full experience of what living with cystic fibrosis is like. We have a lot of amazing artists in the show from all around the world, and you can see some beautiful art and talent on display. So I'll see you at the gallery.
So my name is Dylan Mortimer. I have, with 18 other artists, an exhibition at DNJ Gallery in Santa Monica. That is one of the first exhibitions ever of all CF artists, 18 CF artists from around the world and around the country in this exhibition. And we would love to come celebrate with you, raise awareness with you. 30% of all sales of artwork go to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. So we are encouraging everybody to come see the show, see the amazing show, see all these artists have done, and help support, help raise awareness for cystic fibrosis, but for hope itself, and all the research that is happening for this rare disease, and all the long way we have come in moving towards a cure of this disease to have impact not only for cystic fibrosis, but chronic illness itself, research and discovery itself, possibility and art making creation itself. Hope to see you at the gallery.